Back in the year 1840, when I was just a greenhorn of 13, Professor Mackenzie, a Methodist elder, set up the first real school worth mentioning in those wild Texas parts. Now, calling it a fine school might be stretching the truth a bit by today's standards, but for a country as raw and untamed as ours, it was about as good as a schoolhouse could get. Mackenzie didn't just teach readin' and cipherin', he took in boarders, too. Any young uns who lived too far out on the prairie to ride and each day stayed under his roof, where he kept them in line with the same kind of strictness he applied to his Bible lessons. Among those boarders were two boys, Dick and Joe. I ain't gonna name their folks, because plenty of folks round these parts still remember this story, and their daddy's name carries a weight of its own. Now, times were lean that year, tighter than a rusted cinch strap. Food was scarce, and folks made do with whatever they could get their hands on. Dick and Joe, poor fellas, had been stuck eating dried pumpkin for dinner day after day. And let me tell you, even the hungriest cowpoke has his limit. One noon, as the boys sat side by side on a rough-hewn bench, their dinner pail open between them, the professor happened by. His sharp eye caught the sight of them sittin' there, starin' at that same dried pumpkin without taking a single bite. "Boys," Mackenzie said, his voice carrying that deep, righteous tone he used on Sundays, "are you going to eat without offering thanks?" Dick, always quick with his tongue, said, "No, sir. We were just taking a moment to think of what to say." The professor, sensing there was more to this than met the eye, folded his arms and waited. That's when Joe, bowing his head and clasping his hands together, let out a prayer so plain and honest it could have come straight from the good book itself. "Lord of love, look down from above upon poor Dick and Joe. Give us meat that we can eat, and let the pumpkin go." For a moment, there was silence, then a slow, knowing smile spread across the professor's face. That simple, heartfelt plea must have struck him deeper than any sermon ever could, because from that day forward, the boys never saw another scrap of dried pumpkin in their dinner pail. Professor Mackenzie's school started small, just a handful of students in a rough-built schoolhouse, but over time, it grew into a fine institution. Many a preacher came out of that place, and some of the sharpest Methodist minds Texas ever saw owed their learning to him. The professor used to say there were only two things a man could make out of a clever young boy, a preacher or a horse thief. And on the Texas frontier, sometimes the line between the two was mighty thin. Life on the Texas frontier demanded more than strength. It called for spirit, wit, and the kind of wisdom you couldn't always find in a book. In a time when dried pumpkin passed for lunch and prayers doubled as protest, young boys like William Banta found their footing in the most unexpected places. Professor Mackenzie's school may have started with a handful of students and a heart full of scripture, but its lessons echoed far beyond the classroom walls. Thanks for riding along with us through this tale of grit, grace, and growing up on the edge of civilization. If this story made you smile or sparked a memory, give it a like, share it with someone who loves history, and subscribe to follow the trail of the Banta legacy. Until next time, keep your heart open, your humor sharp, and your purpose steady. Because out here, even the smallest lessons can shape the strongest lives.